the business of creating better futures for everyone, you realize that there's often more than one finish line. And while speed is important, what really pushes everything forward is continuous transformation. It's what leads to better futures, to real substantial change. It connects the people, IP, and industries that create entirely new hybrid businesses. It turns an insurance industry that covers people into a wellness industry that helps them recover. It opens faster routes for first responders. Teaches bacteria to eat microplastics from the ocean. Deploys trusted AI to preserve and protect our forest and wildlife. And even fights wildfires from space. We are committed to perpetual impact because it's what pushes the world forward.
With suspicious mind, and we can build our dreams on suspicious minds. Oh, let our love survive, or dry the tears from your eyes. Don't let a good thing die. When, honey, you know I've never lied to you. We caught in a trap. I can't walk out because I love you too much, baby. We caught in a trap. We caught in a trap.
My face above the water, my feet can't touch the ground, and it feels like I can see the sands on the horizon every time you are not around. I'm slowly drifting away, wave after wave, wave after wave. Slowly drifting and it feels like I'm drowning, pulling against the stream, pulling against the stream.
Good afternoon. Yeah. Good afternoon. Please take your seats. Thank you very much. Welcome and thank you for joining us at the official launch of the Spain Investors Day. Please welcome Héctor Flórez, President of Deloitte.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for Deloitte to be part of this unique professional forum once again. Thank you very much, Estudio de Comunicación, for your kind invitation. I'd like to start by sharing a brief story. A few weeks ago, I attended a session of the Deloitte Global Executive Committee held in Singapore. My global CEO asked me, what lies behind the strong performance of the Spanish economy? There must be a reason why Spain is doing so well, he said. I explained that Spain is indeed a great country, that we have very talented people, leading companies in relevant sectors, and excellent results in many areas such as tourism or exports. We are striving to do many things right, I concluded. This short story is just an example of how the world sees Spain today as a growth engine of Europe. Of course, there are some imbalances to tackle and challenges to overcome, but above all, our country stands out for its solid growth trajectory in recent years. And I am convinced that there is significant room for further progress. Spain has the potential to become an industrial, energy, and digital powerhouse in Europe. It will drive additional growth and improve our continent's strategic autonomy in fundamental areas for its future. However, for this to happen, we certainly need more investment, which will help Spain unleash its full potential. This is, in my opinion, a key priority for the upcoming years. And I am confident that this new edition of Spain Investors Day will be a great opportunity to highlight that our country is a very appealing destination for foreign investment. I would like to congratulate our Minister of Economy, Carlos Cuerpo, on the impact he is making in driving the successful evolution of Spain's economy. And I also want to encourage him to remain bold and committed to implementing the reforms needed to attract more investment. They will be pivotal to improving productivity and ensuring that our current growth dynamic is sustainable in the future. So, Minister of Economy, representatives of companies and investment funds, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much for your confidence in Spain's potential. Minister, the floor is yours. Thank you.
I will remain bold, don't worry. Es un placer intervenir en este foro, en esta edición. Lo hablábamos antes, es uno de los primeros actos que tuve como nuevo ministro recién nombrado el año pasado, y me encanta venir aquí a compartir mi visión sobre la economía española y la fortaleza y ese modelo exitoso, como tú bien decías, Héctor, por el que nos preguntan allá dónde vamos, a todos. Y yo creo que eso es una señal estupenda, una señal que desde luego está basada en resultados, está basada en datos. Si tuviera que resumir mi intervención en un solo mensaje, sin duda sería un mensaje positivo, sería un mensaje de optimismo, en cuanto al momento en el que está la economía española y a esa gran ventana de oportunidad que tenemos también hacia adelante. Mensaje optimista por lo que viene, no solo por cómo están yendo las cosas. Pese al complejo y cada vez más agitado entorno internacional, España está cada vez más presente en el plano económico y se ha convertido, desde luego, en un ejemplo de éxito, gracias a una política económica que funciona. Un modelo de características propias, diferenciales, que tiene que ser nuestra imagen de marca. Desde luego, un modelo de crecimiento equilibrado en el que los logros macro se trasladan también al día a día de los ciudadanos, a la calidad de vida de nuestros ciudadanos. Y esto es, desde luego, lo que asegura y debe asegurar la sostenibilidad de nuestro modelo hacia adelante. Let me switch to English as well. When we talk about the specifics of the Spanish growth model, I usually say that it's about the balance. It's about its balance component. It's a balanced economic model, basically ensuring that growth is not only outstanding in the short run, but also will be outstanding and leading amongst euro area economies in the next future as well. Let me maybe just highlight a few data points that are just examples of why the Spanish economy is been outperforming our main peers. Of course, we know that both OECD, IMF, other institutions are highlighting Spain as the most rapidly growing advanced economy in 2024. There was also this analysis done by The Economist that was ranking Spain as the best performing economy in 2024. And as I said, this is despite a very challenging context, ongoing geopolitical fragmentation, lack of growth amongst our key partners, inflationary pressures, and high interest rates over the past few years. For the first time in our history, in our economic history, the Spanish economy has actually mitigated the most acute effects of international shocks rather than amplifying them. And this is another key element of the success story of the Spanish economy. And that's, as I said, the result of policy, of economic policy that is working and that has our own DNA, our own distinct character. Let me share some data, as I said. We have been systematically surprising analysts and institutions with a higher than expected growth rate for the past couple of years, 3 years, I would say. Just to give you a number, at the beginning of 2024, the main analysts, experts in Spain, were actually predicting a 1.5% GDP growth for 2024, in January 2024. December 2024, the expected growth rate for Spain is at 3%. So doubling during the year, that's just an expression of these constant positive surprises that we've been having throughout the year. We will be growing most likely 4 times above the euro area average in 2024 and actually contributing 40% to its total growth in the euro area. Spain is positioning itself as a euro area growth engine. And that's just the beginning, because as I said, this is also foreseen to be the case for 2025 and 2026. Actually, the spillover effect to 2025 of this positive growth in 2024 is that by 1st of January 2025, we were already growing by 1.2%. And from then on, so that's also ensuring that growth rate in 2025 will be undoubtedly above what was considered the Spanish GDP potential growth, which was around 1.5. So we will be growing around 2.5 or even above in this year as well. Growth has been driven not only by, as I said, increased employment, but also increased or improved productivity. Again, for the first time in decades, Spain is creating jobs without reducing productivity. Usually these two components were actually not evolving in the same direction. This is actually happening now. As said, international organizations are expecting this performance and leadership to be maintained in 25 and 26. So this growth performance is sustainable, and actually its sustainability lies in its balanced nature. That's the main point that I wanted to make. And this is actually the true distinctive trademark, particularly when, as I said, we compare it to previous growth cycles. Let me share why I think this is a balanced growth model and how this can contribute to its sustainability in the medium to long run. You mentioned, Hector, the external sector. I wanted to begin with the external sector because it has a main firm component also in the Spanish case. We have an unprecedented financing capacity, positive surplus in our external sector, 4.2% of GDP. If you remember the previous growth period, which was prior to the financial crisis, our current account was exceedingly in deficit numbers, actually growing and therefore exposing us to the consequences of the global financial crisis. Spain's businesses are demonstrating their expertise, their competitiveness when they go abroad, And actually, this is having them being leaders in international markets. This year, I had actually the privilege to visit a few key markets for Spain, including US, Japan, Canada, Brazil, Colombia, Senegal. I went also to Ukraine, and actually there was a common message, which was, of course, the high standard and excellence of Spanish firms. This is something also to be very proud of, and it's like a medal. Being a Spanish minister, wherever you go, you get this positive feedback on how Spanish companies are performing abroad. But let me focus on one key element within the external sector, which is services exports. Of course, we know that tourism remains a key contributor to our external numbers. We are in record high numbers in terms of tourism and also spending of tourists. But I wanted just to make a specific point in terms of also the sustainability of this trend, because what we've seen is that this trend is also leading to an increasingly diversified income or intake of tourists, with higher value-added alternatives growing, such as cultural or business tourism. Also, this diversification is reducing the seasonal and geographical concentration of the tourism model, which is, again, good news going forward. What we see, for example, in the data on credit card spending is that growth in tourism is actually happening more heavily in what we call shoulder months. So either just before or just after the summer period, which is, again, proving to be an additional element of sustainability of this trend. But when I talk about exports, I usually put the focus on non-tourism exports, because that's a key element of the good results of the Spanish external sector. The dynamics of these non-tourism exports, non-tourism services exports are essential to explain what's going on in Spain. Actually, these revenues from non-tourism services have surpassed 100 billion. 100 billion, they're above what we get from tourism services, which is usually something that is not that well known, but we're getting more out of non-tourism services than we get out of tourism, which is usually around 95, 96 billion, and more than 100 billion of revenues out of non-tourism services. So non-tourism services, of course, you know it better than me. These include services to business, IT, accounting, financial services, which are, of course, often associated to higher value-added jobs, and of course associated also to higher, to human capital with higher possibilities, with better skills, and therefore higher formation as well. And this positive trend, these dynamics in terms of the increase in non-tourism services, is another proof of the structural change that is ongoing in the Spanish economy, that our economy is experiencing. And this success story of the external sector cannot be told without actually making a reference to foreign investment figures. Foreign investment in our country is, I would say, booming. Spain is becoming a hub for foreign direct investment. And let me just make a reference, because I think that's the most, the clearer way to look at it, to the FDI database of the Financial Times, where you have data for all countries, and therefore you can have a better comparison. Over the past 6 years, between 2018 and 2024, Spain was the 5th recipient of greenfield projects, 5 in the world, after US, UK, Germany, and India. But when you look at where are those investments going, so basically Spain was number 2 in greenfield renewable energy projects, and number 4 in R&D projects, also those related to AI. That's Spain today. It's not just tourism. This is what Spain is becoming. So it's not just the quantity of investment, but also the transformative and the strategic power of Spain and the investment that is coming. With, of course, again, further potential to keep this growth model going for the next few years, boosting competitiveness and also our strategic autonomy, and therefore our economic security also going forward. The strength of the external sector has additional relevance, as I said, in today's fragmented world. And in this sense, I think we need to keep on going what we've been doing for the past few years, which is enlarging partnerships at the EU level and also at the bilateral level with Spain, coming from Spain with other key strategic partners. And on this, I wanted to mention the recent agreement between the EU and Mercosur, because I think this is the way forward. We need, this was long awaited, and of course we know it's still to be ratified, but we need these strategic alliances with key partners. We need this agreement that will create the largest trading bloc on earth, nothing less. And this will be key to position the EU and position Spain as a key bridge between the EU and the Mercosur area as key partners, as key players in the next future. But looking beyond the external sector, which was the first component of this balanced growth path, of course, there is the green dimension. The environmental dimension. Spain is reaping the benefits of the green transition, of our green bet, making the most of our natural resources with a clear environmental dividend, but also a clear financial dividend. The bet for the green energies is proving to be, of course, very profitable in terms of competitiveness for our firms and in terms of also of attraction of investment. Spain is an example on how to decarbonize our energy mix. And on this, you know the figure, Sarah was here yesterday, 50% of the electricity in 2024 came from renewable sources, and this makes us the first major European economy to exceed the 50% threshold. Of course, as I said, environmental benefits from lower, but also economic benefits from lower electricity prices, and competitiveness edge coming from this green bet. Major assets, our natural resources, are becoming a key asset going forward, leading the transition, but also leading, as I said, the strategic autonomy race. Y déjenme comentar en español el último de los elementos clave. Hemos hablado del elemento del sector exterior, de la competitividad, de la atracción de inversión. Hemos hablado también, por supuesto, de la apuesta por las energías renovables, pero también el carácter social del crecimiento en España. Es ser capaces de compatibilizar el crecimiento con la consecución de derechos, con la ganancia de derechos para nuestros ciudadanos, es otro elemento fundamental que hace que este crecimiento vaya a ser más sostenible también hacia adelante. Priorizar esa vocación social. Aquí un mercado laboral con excelentes resultados, todos sabéis las cifras, más de 21,3 millones de afiliados, récord histórico, pero además esta creación de empleo ha sido compatible con que ese empleo sea de calidad. Estamos hablando de una reducción de la temporalidad a tasas europeas, uno de los grandes retos del mercado laboral ya ha conseguido superarse. Estamos hablando también de un empleo concentrado en ramas de mayor valor añadido, la I+D, productos farmacéuticos, en tecnologías de la información y la comunicación. Ahí es donde se está concentrando la gran creación de empleo en estos últimos años. Vemos también cómo ha mejorado el poder adquisitivo de los ciudadanos en España por encima incluso de los países de nuestro entorno. Así lo reflejan los datos de la OCDE, que muestran que la renta real per cápita de los hogares ha aumentado más de 6 puntos porcentuales desde el inicio de la guerra de Ucrania, más que lo que ha sucedido en Alemania, en Italia o en Francia, y también más que la media de la OCDE. La mejora, por lo tanto, además, es mayor en aquellos hogares de menor renta, gracias a medidas que hemos puesto sobre la mesa, como el incremento del salario mínimo interprofesional o el escudo social que se ha puesto en marcha en los últimos años. Equilibrio, por lo tanto, en lo económico, en lo medioambiental y en lo social. Un círculo virtuoso que está sucediendo en España y que nos permite hablar de estas cifras tan exitosas. Y sin renunciar a otro punto fundamental, que es la responsabilidad fiscal. Un despliegue sin precedentes del escudo social, de inversiones, van de la mano, por supuesto, de un elemento de responsabilidad presupuestaria. En el año 2024 se habrá reducido la deuda, cuando tengamos los datos ya finales, más de 20 puntos porcentuales desde el pico que se alcanzó a inicios del 2021 como consecuencia de la respuesta a la pandemia. Más de 20 puntos de reducción de deuda. Quiero que nos quedemos también con esta cifra porque da ese punto también de balance, de contrapeso y de equilibrio en el modelo y, por lo tanto, de nuevo, de sostenibilidad hacia adelante. Este es un comportamiento equilibrado que es resultado, como decía anteriormente, de políticas que funcionan en este caso, políticas que son capaces de ayudarnos a consolidar la modernización de nuestro modelo productivo y hacerlo de la mano de avances en la calidad de vida de los ciudadanos. Let me just quickly transition to the second part of my speech, which will be shorter, I promise. I know I'm being the obstacle between you and food, but you have fantastic Spanish cheese there for you to make the waiting bearable. So let me just make a mention to the Spanish recovery plan, because I think this is a key element that, of course, explains also why we are able to somehow put together all these different dimensions that just a few years ago might have appeared impossible to match, impossible to combine. When you look at the Spanish recovery plan, as I said, this is again providing a double dividend. This is helping us go throughout or overcome the double shock that we had with the pandemic and with the inflation crisis due to the war in Ukraine, and also modernize our economy, and all these not only without scars but becoming more productive and more resilient. Just to give you another figure, Next Generation EU funds continue to reach Spanish companies. When we look at how much has actually touched the real economy, we have more than 47 billion of EU transfers that have been awarded to specific companies and therefore have reached, as I said, the real economy, for them to be able to carry on their own investment projects. So beyond the big figures, what I usually like to do is look at where those funds are going, what companies are actually taking advantage of those funds, in which sectors, and how is this helping us make a more modernized and, of course, resilient economy going forward. Let me just give you two examples. We have PLD Space, is a pioneering Spanish company in aerospace, which is a reference also within the European sector in the development of reusable rockets. We have our Miura rockets, and this is another element of pride, which is also favored and enabled thanks to the funds of the recovery plan. Let me just give you another example. Meltio. Meltio is a leader in manufacturing metal 3D printing solutions. They use wire laser metal deposition technology. So it's for me it's almost impossible to understand. But what they're doing is actually having a leadership role in the world in these technologies, which are actually reaching, as we know, the most advanced economies and their defense departments and others, and other leading actors in this sector. They have taken this technology to more than 40 countries. They're present in the US, India, Italy, Germany, and this was made possible again thanks to the recovery funds. So we're developing an ecosystem. There is a narrative and there is an impact behind what we're doing. This ecosystem for greater innovation in key sectors for the future. Is of course the element of reforms. You were mentioning, Hector, we of course know that investment efforts need to go hand in hand with structural reforms. We have also the recovery plan as our guide towards what needs to be done in terms of structural reforms that will help our companies become bigger and more productive. You know, I will mention now just a few of the projects that we are putting in place on this, but let me mention, just for you to know, for those of you who are not aware, we are now in the second phase of the recovery plan implementation, where we are rolling out up to 84 billion euros in loans via specifically designated financial instruments with not only ICO or National Development Bank, but also the EIB as the main financing arms of these funds. So the idea again is to give continuity to this investment phase that was forced, that was enabled via the first phase of the plan, which was actually putting in place more than 70 billion of transfers to the Spanish economy. So now we add to that 84 billion in loans in order for us to be able to give, as I said, a clear continuity to this investment roadmap. But let me just give you an idea or mention rapidly the main challenges or a few of the challenges, because I think this is also key to talk about here today. We are very much aware of the ambitious roadmap that is ahead of us, that we need to maintain the momentum, that we need to consolidate growth going forward, but we know the challenges that are ahead of us as well. Let me switch to Spanish because I want to talk about Valencia, just for a minute. Sin duda, el reto que todos tenemos más presente ahora a corto plazo es la recuperación de las zonas afectadas por la DANA. Se ha puesto en marcha, como saben, un plan ambicioso que cuenta inicialmente con una dotación de 16.600 millones de euros y estamos ahora mismo involucrados para hacer que este dinero, que estas ayudas lleguen lo antes posible. El ejemplo clarísimo de ello es la actuación del Consorcio de Compensación de Seguros, que ha alcanzado ya los 1.080 millones en indemnizaciones a los afectados por la DANA. Han llegado ya estas indemnizaciones a más de 84.000 afectados. Estamos con los afectados y, como lo ha dicho muchas veces el presidente del Gobierno, seguiremos estando mientras sea necesario, no solo en la acción inmediata, en la reconstrucción, sino también en el relanzamiento de la economía valenciana. Y precisamente en eso estamos trabajando ya. Además, como saben, el propio presidente anunció esta semana un nuevo PERTE, proyecto estratégico de vivienda en la zona de Valencia, para impulsar de nuevo la innovación en un sector tradicionalmente más intensivo en mano de obra como es el de la construcción, fomentando la innovación en la construcción industrializada y la construcción modular, favoreciendo de nuevo, por lo tanto, la aportación del sector de la construcción cada vez con un mayor valor añadido para hacer frente a ese reto que tenemos por delante, como es el de la vivienda y el acceso a una vivienda en condiciones asequibles. Housing, and specifically affordable housing, is indeed one of the government's top priorities at the moment. As you know, we are working on a series of measures, also announced by the President early this week, with the main objective, of course, of ensuring adequate supply of housing, accelerating procedures, boosting investments to guarantee this social right, particularly for the young. And at the same time, of course, despite the outstanding performance of employment, we know that there's still work to be done. We have measures to keep on enhancing the situation in the labor market, mainly by better performance in terms of the matching between vacancies and opportunities for workers. So we know that we need to keep on pushing particularly vocational training and its landing in the specific needs of firms, but we know also that we need to keep on making the most out of immigrants' human capital. They provide a critical contribution to our growth model, and there is scope there for improvement as regards their integration into our labor market. And the final line of action is competitiveness, and I will end with this. That's a challenge that you well know that we share amongst European countries. That have been widely addressed by Letta and Draghi's report. And on this, Spain is adopting a very proactive role. We have been working for months with different member states, and we're pushing for what we call at the European level an European Competitiveness Lab. So the idea is to foster innovation and agility in decision-making at the European level. You know that agility in decision-making and governance at the EU level is not our strongest point. So we know that we need to work to avoid frustration, having a very good set of recommendations from Draghi and Letta, but not being able to put them in practice in the short run. So we're creating this competitiveness lab, which would be like a sandbox, a space for member states to test new integration projects in a controlled environment where initiatives such as Capital Markets Union initiatives can be launched and therefore quickly advanced and extended to all EU members who want to participate. We have a specific initiative to begin with, which is actually the creation of a European rating system to facilitate financing for SMEs, both in the domestic country but also abroad. But beyond this initiative, of course, there are many others from other member states who could also be integrated in this framework. At the national level, we're also making progress, not only with the creation of the Productivity Council that will help us land the recommendations in the Draghi and Letta reports to the Spanish reality, but we're also developing AI tools that will reduce the cost and the time that particularly SMEs spend on less productive tasks. But we're also making progress in terms of one of the most exciting initiatives, which is what we call Régimen 20. And I will finish with this one. It draws on Professor Letta's 28th regime proposal. If you remember, he wanted to create a framework at the EU level which could work as an entry door to all EU member states. So to facilitate the operation of firms at the EU level, and to really provide for a key step towards integrating EU markets. So we're doing that at the Spanish level with the idea, with a huge collaboration between with the regions and local entities, to agree on a common simplified regulatory approach for businesses to make the most of our domestic single market. We have a specific plan, which is actually rather ambitious for this 2025, with a timeline that is proving to be, as I said, a bit tight, but we envisage the first set of measures to be delivered by the summer. Because our ultimate intention is, of course, to develop an agile regulatory framework at the national level, together with financing opportunities that can actually be, or that can provide for the best environment where businesses can innovate and can, of course, thrive. Let me just finish there by thanking everyone for your interest in opportunities, in the opportunities that Spain provides. La imagen de marca de España es la de una política que funciona, un modelo económico de éxito, que se traduce también en el ámbito medioambiental, social y fiscal, confeccionando un modelo equilibrado, un modelo de éxito equilibrado y por lo tanto sostenible, lo que es nuestra mejor herramienta, desde luego, para hacer frente a los retos venideros. Entre nuestras fortalezas, como he dicho, están el sector exterior, abierto, dinámico y un marco capaz de atraer inversiones, especialmente en sectores punteros, que alimentan ese crecimiento sostenible. Quedan muchos retos por delante, pero tenemos una hoja de ruta ambiciosa. Vamos a seguir trabajando. Spain has earned a trademark of an economic model that works, and we are committed to work further to take this forward and make the most of these unique assets. Of course, in close partnership with all of you and all of those that will be interested in investing in Spain. As you said, Hector, let's unleash our full potential. Thank you very much.
Hola. Hola. Hello. Ministro. Thank you very much, Ministro, for your remarks. Thanks for joining us again this year. As Hector was saying, you joined us last year right after your appointment. So thank you very much for coming back. We hope that's an indication of how appreciative you are of the format. So I'm Manuel Porras. I represent BNP Paribas. We have some questions we've collected from investors that we'd like to convey to you. Some of them cover some of the aspects you've already mentioned, but we'll try to be more specific just to make sure that we land them with the interest of the audience. The economic figures for Spain are very rosy. It's not just a matter of this government sharing. It's been portrayed as notorious within the press. What are, in your views, the three main obstacles that the Spanish economy faces in 2025 that could undermine this growth projected for the year?
Okay, that's a good question. Maybe I will not be as specific as just referring to 2025, because I think the main challenges will probably stay there for longer than just 2025. So of course, I think the main, let me call them challenges rather than obstacles. It's, language matters sometimes. So I would say the international environment, for sure. We know that the geopolitical uncertainty that is around the corner is actually having every one of us trying to find our way in this very difficult strategic autonomy race that will come. And on this, I've said many times, it's just not just a Spanish story, this is an EU challenge, that Europe needs to keep its own vision. We need to maintain, again, our own DNA on how to do things. We need to be open but not naive. That time is gone at this point. And on this, I think we need to be a key player on the table. Not just, so the question is not whether the EU follows one or the other. The question is what are the EU's interests and how can we actually take this further. So I think we can discuss the details, because then there's a sectoral component to this, and there's a mix between, of course, industrial policy, trade policy, energy policy. There are many aspects to this question, but I think the international environment is undoubtedly one. And on that, I talked before about Mercosur. I think this is a key example on how we can make sure that we have our own place at the table. Then the second one, I would say, at the domestic level, is housing, which is again another EU issue or another EU challenge. Actually, when you see the composition of the EU Commission, it's the first time that there is such a high priority when it comes to housing. And for us, of course, it has a key social dimension, because that's the main character. We need access in affordable condition to housing, particularly for young people, so that they can actually start their own life process, and they can have the usual life cycle as we all have had in our times. But there is also an economic element associated to resolving the bottleneck in the housing market, which has to do with labor mobility, which has to do, as we know, with recent empirical evidence, with fertility. So all factors related to potential growth, medium to long-term potential growth as well. So housing is, of course, another key element, another key challenge in the short and medium run. And this is why we are putting so many efforts into bringing this to a good end, and having as quick as possible, as I said, going back to this element of access to affordable housing, affecting, of course, the construction sector with an element, I think, of public-private partnership, which is necessary. When we look at what has happened with the construction sector in Spain, it went from 12-13% of Spanish GDP to 6%. And we know that a structural, we could say, or a steady state share of the construction sector with respect to GDP might be around 9-10%. So there is a huge potential there to growth still, that will come again with benefits in terms of more or a larger housing supply. And it is the element, as I said, also coming from the rebuilding of the public stock as well. So there's, we can have a specific discussion on housing if you want. And then the third element, I think, is related, it's maybe multifactorial, but it's the social component, which has to do, again, with, when you look at what the citizens think, or the population thinks in many countries. Spain is an example. When you look at surveys, when they're asked, how is your personal economic situation? These are Spanish data. 2/3 of Spaniards say that their own personal economic situation is either good or very good. But when you ask them about the overall, the aggregate national economic situation, it's just 1/3 who say that this is actually good or very good. There's a dissociation here, which happens also in other areas. Another area where this is actually going on is the impact of migration on growth, the impact of migration also on the labor market. And I think these are elements that will prove to be a key challenge for our democracies, and therefore also for the sustainability of our growth model.
Okay, thank you. Very clear. We have there is a new US administration. A new president will be inaugurated next week. What is, in your view, from an economic perspective, the main impact that the policies of a new administration could have on Spanish economy?
Well, let's wait first to see what those policies are. That will be my first reaction. But then there are many layers to which, of course, we can look at the bilateral US-Spain relationship, which is actually excellent when we look at trade, when we look at investment, particularly in the presence of Spanish firms in the US is growing, ever more present. Spanish firms also in key sectors there, and we hope and expect these trends to continue in the next few years. We will, of course, be with our Spanish companies, helping, supporting them in their presence there. When you look at the degree of exposure of Spain with respect to the US compared to other countries, other EU countries, you can say that the degree is lower or in the lower range in terms of the strategic importance for specific sectors or in terms of its share in our overall trade. But I think what we have is a lot of room to grow with respect to the US. So I would actually flip it to the positive. There is an element there where we can gain from actually reinforcing these relationship with the US. It's in terms of human capital, in terms of bilateral trade, but also in terms of investment. Let's see, as I said, what are the first few measures. But then from an EU angle, which I think also is important, we need to keep a coordinated vision and action from the EU perspective. We need the EU to be a key actor. So this is not an element that we can play out on our own, and there is not just the European Commission which would be leading some of those discussions. It's also the presence of the different leaders that also needs to put the EU label on top of those discussions, because that's how we will have more leverage, and that's how also, as I said, our presence at the big table will be more noticed.
Thanks. You have mentioned the Letta and Draghi reports. You've mentioned some of the measures that are being set in motion at European level. What is, in your view, the low-hanging fruits or the measures that the Spanish government could take to improve Spanish productivity?
Well, I mentioned already some of them. I think it's important that we translate those reports to the national realities, which is not always easy. So I think this element of bringing them down to the national landscape and see what we can do. For example, with this 28th regime, we're doing this. My idea there is, as soon as we make progress at the national level, we can of course start scaling this simplification, this removal of red tape, of administrative barriers. For example, scaling it to the Iberian Peninsula. So we have a clear case there to cooperate, to collaborate with our Portuguese friends. And then once these projects actually start being successful, it's much easier to, of course, scale them up. This is why it's important to have these spaces like the lab to push with these projects without having to wait. If I remember correctly, in Draghi's report, he said that it usually takes 19 months to put a project in place at the European level to actually bring regulation to life. But my point is, that's supposing that you come to an agreement on what needs to be done. Many times at the EU level, what happens is that we do not agree on how to push things forward. We have been discussing Capital Markets Union for more than 10 years, and we're still there. So there are many low-hanging fruits to be taken, but we need to be bold and we need to act quickly. And on this, of course, we will need financing for all those investments that are needed. As Draghi said, 800 to 850 billion a year. And the first source has to be the private financing, of course, capital markets, banking financing. We need to unlock these resources. And for that, we need to be bold and we need to start moving quickly.
Thanks. We have two more questions very quickly. This is an investment forum, so I think this question is quite pertinent. What can be done? Let me start again. One of the recommendations of BME's white paper published last year was the encouragement of retail investors. What do you think could be done to improve the presence of retail investors in the Spanish stock market?
That's an excellent question. My answer today is different than the one I would have given you a year ago. So it's good that you asked me today. I would say the first thing that retail investors need is trust. And trust actually comes also usually with transparency and comes with information. And I think this is the first step. Then, of course, aside from this element of trust, there is an element of financial education. We know that there is need for our citizens to have higher concepts or a better education in terms of financial concepts. But I think in the relationship with the retail investors and financial entities or others, there needs to be this element of transparency, of trust, which would ensure that there is a continuation in this investment and that they do not resort in the end to deposits or I should not say that, or to the T-bills, no? Because that's in the end, our letras are fantastic, but that's not the most immediate way to redirect these savings towards productive investment. So that's the first. And the second one is we need to put in place proper alternatives to those very safe, easy to understand products and easy to compare between each other. Because in the end, it's easy to compare between different mortgages, for example, for a citizen, but it's not easy to compare between different financial or investment products. We need to lower the bar and ease these constraints for them, so that in the end, it can we can reduce the red tape there as well. We have technology to do that and to help us read a contract of 30 pages and really extract what actually matters for the retail investor, so that he can compare, he can therefore again have a higher element of trust and therefore know the result and anticipate and keep on investing further.
Thanks. We're running almost out of time, so I'll squeeze the last question. So take as long as you can to answer. And on banking consolidation, what is, in your view, the right balance between competitiveness and consolidation?
Did you say competition or competitiveness?
Competitiveness. As words matter.
No, okay, let me take my time to answer this one. So there is an element in banking consolidation which we've seen, for example, in Spain for the past 10 years, which actually has been very healthy in terms of providing a more competitive financial sector. And actually the financial sector is today a positive factor, a lever towards higher growth. It was during the pandemic, it was during the COVID shock, and it is now also in implementing the recovery plan. So this is in part thanks to this, of course, process of consolidation that we've seen in the Spanish financial sector. And then there is the element of competition, and which is again key. And we were talking about retail investors, but we should talk also about financial clients. And there comes also the EU dimension. So if you allow me to mix the part. So we have to look at the relevant market. So as long as the relevant market is the national market, we have to look at effective competition at the national level when we think about the different processes of consolidation in the banking sector. If we manage, as we're trying to do, to actually enlarge the relevant market concept to the EU wide or to the EU scale, then of course immediately the competition element eases out because we know that you have access to many more options. So that's, to me, the process. So we need to, at any moment, ensure that there is enough level of competition. We had just this week also an analysis from the Spanish Competition Authority on the translation, or the beta, if you want, of the increase in the ECB interest rates to the deposits in Spain, and why it was actually below other countries. So the reasons behind this lower transmission also when compared to previous episodes. And of course there is an element that the Bank of Spain also found last year, which is liquidity, high liquidity, and therefore less need for those funds from the financial sector. But there was also an element related to specific effective competition in the sector, the availability of people to actually shift between banks or find those alternatives to these products. Again, we need to provide for these minimum threshold of competition, and therefore after that, once you ensure that you're there, you can of course go ahead to have the most competitive sector that you can. But again, the more you integrate at the EU level, the easier it is also to unleash or to lift these competition restraints.
Thank you very much, dear Minister. Hope to see you next year. It'll be a proof. Thank you very much.
Thank you.